You spent 2 months in Iraq. In which year?
This was 84 or 85. I forget the exact year, on a holiday.
Peak of Saddam's rule?
Yeah, peak of Saddam's rule. It was also the peak of the Iran-Iraq war, by the way. There used to be missiles falling and things like that. But I have a very pleasant memory of Baghdad in those days, right? It was very modern. The way you see modernism, which is women going around in skirts, sleeveless tops, and things like that, women in positions of power. Um, I remember I used to keep going to the museum, the Baghdad Museum, which then got ransacked when the Americans botched up their invasion. And, they loved the fact that a little kid wanted to come and read things about Babylonian history and Sumerian history and all of that. So, all my history teachers always loved me, right? I've never met a historian, uh, a museum person, or an archaeologist that didn't love me simply because I'm constantly like, oh, hey, tell me about this. They're not used to getting much of that. But I remember it being a lovely place. But when you're a kid, you're protected from all the dirt. And much later, when my aunt was showing me these albums after my uncle was posted there. After he had died, she was showing me these albums. She was showing me all these people who were in photos with me, in some of them, not all, in some of them. Where she's like, oh, these people, the police came at night, took them and shot them. What the hell? But apparently I have no memory of these people. But
So, would you say that it was a flourishing society with a strong element of brutality thanks to Saddam's mind?
yes,
That's what it was. So he'd kept the country uh, as its best flourishing self, but yet
again, see, it's such a difficult country because it's an artificially created country by the British. It's not a natural country because there are Kurds in the north, there's Sunnis in the middle, and there's a huge Shia majority in the south, right? He was a Sunni who hated the Shia. And in order to hold such a diverse society together, he believed he had to be very brutal. Maybe, may not be. I think he was excessively brutal with the benefit of hindsight. Not that I saw it when I was a kid. Um, and in the end, it was excessive brutality that led to the collapse of his system. Megalomania, too much warmongering and invading all your neighbors.
can you draw out the whole timeline? Starting from when Iraq was ruled by the British.
Okay, so it was actually Iraq is very curious. Uh, Iraq is the Arab word for Iran. So it was called Iraq Arab and Iraq Ajam. Iraq Arabic Persia and infidel. Ajam isn't exactly kafir, but it's very close to kafir.
Really?
And what ends up happening is what is today Shia Iran stays under the Safavids. It's called the Battle of Chaldiran, which is the Ottomans versus the Safid dynasty. And the boundary gets drawn at what is today Iran, Iraq. Now, Iraq is Arab, it remains Sunni. The Safavids conquer Persia and they turn it Shia. And when the Ottoman Empire collapses after the First World War, the British take it over. It's called the Sykes-Picot Agreement, which is also the root cause of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, in a sense. It's where Jordan comes out of, Syria comes out of it, Iraq comes out of it, Lebanon comes out of it, Israel kind of comes out of it. Tangentially, Saudi Arabia comes out of it. And if you notice, that is why most of their boundaries are all straight lines. Fake boundaries drawn on paper. Now, Iraq is such an artificial identity ki upar there are Kurds, Sunnis, Shias, like we discussed. There is a king imposed by the British who is very unpopular. He's killed off by his own people in a coup. This party called the Baath Party takes over, and there's this whole thing of pan-Arabism. This is the royals versus republics that contest. that happened in the entire Arab world in the 50s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. So, Egypt, the king was overthrown and it became a republic under Nasser. In Iraq, the same thing happened. The king was overthrown, killed very brutally with his entire family. And he was the cousin of the Jordanian king, the current king's dad.
Like this is 70s?
60s,
Okay.
50s, and 60s.
Okay.
Killed, gets overthrown, and then these socialist revolutions. So from kingships, they become dictatorships. In Iraq, it's something called the Baath Party. There is a leader who slowly loses power. Again, Saddam Hussein, was the Stalin type. He accumulated all the bureaucratic power that nobody else wanted and became the real power. Initially, he did some good. He started industrializing and things like that. The problem was he overestimated his industrial capacity, got into wars he shouldn't have, like the Iran-Iraq war, ended up destroying his own country because he didn't know when to stop. You're taking on a country like Iran, which is much more powerful than you. And people tend to forget, till 1979 under the Shah, Iran had a higher living standard and higher per capita income than Taiwan and South Korea. Had it continued there, it would have been a first world country by today. European style industrial power. It got aborted because of Khomeini and the Iran-Iraq war and things. So he starts all these wars, and the moment he finishes a war with Iran, he starts off a war with Kuwait, and that's the end of him. I mean, good, bad, I don't really know. I would say on balance, bad. Some good things.
Bad due to megalomania.
Yeah,
Wanting more
you
and
don't
more.
know when to say enough.
Which year was this Kuwait Iraq conflict?
1989 he invaded. 1990. 1990 he got kicked out, and sanctions. 10 years worth of sanctions, and then the Americans invade and get rid of him and hang him.
Why did America invade?
Look, there's the conspiracy theory explanation, and then there's the more rational explanation. I don't know where the truth lies in this, but conspiracy theory explanation is Jewish conspiracy, oil, etc., etc., which is it stretches it too far. There is the more sane conspiracy theory one, which is that George Bush Jr. felt that George Bush Sr. lost the election because he did not finish the Iraq war properly. And because the son felt that the 1990 war was not finished off properly, that is why his dad lost the election. And it was his family's unfinished business to get rid of Saddam Hussein.
Wow.
Which is why they concocted a whole load of evidence about Iraqi chemical weapons and weapons of mass destruction and things like that. As it's called, WMD, weapons of mass deception, they called it after that. I think that was partially the case, but it fused with the fact that having a guy like Saddam Hussein, he never learnt his lesson. If you'd allowed him to get rehabilitated and build up Iraq again, he would have again started a whole bunch of regional wars. So I think it was the right thing to do, maybe, not for the Iraqis, obviously. I mean, their country's fractured, but then, there's an argument to be made. Was there ever really a country in that place? If it's so prone to fracturing, could it have been a real country? I mean, it was a British invention, really.
I think this whole point of drawing straight borders and grouping together different tribes is effectively a chemical formula to keep war going on for the next 100 years.
It is, right? But then let's look at the counterfactual. If you don't draw these borders, do you think the Sunnis would have stayed in Sunni areas, the Shias would have stayed in Shia areas, and the Kurds would have stayed in Kurd areas? There would have still been conflict. So see, this is why I'm like,
humankind is complex.
And it's not a fairy tale where, everything's happily ever after. Once you solve one problem, it leads to 100 new sets of problems.
I think humankind enjoys being at war all the time.
Because we're fundamentally psychos. Human beings are probably the worst of all fauna on Earth. There are only 3 other animals, I think, that are known to torture and kill and take pleasure in it: dolphins, geese, and chimpanzees. And the common ancestor of the chimpanzee and the human is the one that has the psycho gene. Because there is the Zaire Gap, the Zaire River, which splits chimpanzees to the north and bonobos to the south. Bonobos do not, they do not torture, and they do not kill. Uh, Chimpanzees do, and human beings do. And we have a whole bunch of common ancestors that we knew engaged in extremely violent, cannibalistic torture behavior. It's the same common gene that makes chimpanzees psycho, that makes human beings psycho. We're the most sinister, and in that sense, we're all Idi Amin. We are the peak species on Earth, the apex predator on Earth, because we're willing to do things no other species were willing to do. Even insects, even a praying mantis is less cruel per se than the human being is. So, what does it make you feel like when a invertebrate, a reptile, is less violent than you? That's, like I said, we're all Idi Amin,
I'd say it's great fodder for podcasts.
isn't it? Yeah.